So I'm going to share our wonderful presentation for Gemini, Mercury, and the third house. I really love Mercury. I never really, I guess, realized how important it was. We just always think, oh, it's the way we communicate, but it's far more than that. When we're coming into the body of Aries, we're coming in through the head and we're battling for survival. And then through Taurus, we're, you know, cultivating our personal life and trying to find some resources and looking for land. And then once everything's established, what's next? What's next for a human being to have some wholeness? And that is language and other people and getting some movement. So it's not being so sedentary with Taurus and moving so slow. It's kind of picking up the pace. And there begins to start a rhythm with learning from different people and identifying life in particular ways. So we're going to discuss that today. And so it just kind of makes sense that the transition, you learn to be in your body and rely on mom. And, after a while, you're getting fed and things are going well and you grow larger. And eventually, you got to learn how to walk. And so Gemini is where we get our legs. Gemini is where we start to understand that, like, we can no longer rely on mom or just our immediate environment in the home. We've got to really expand ourselves to know what life is really about, what's our reality. So Gemini really represents the messenger, and introducing language, speech, ideas. This is where we start reading and, really saying mama or dada. And it's where, Gemini will look and say, that's a ball. And that color is red. It's very definitive in terms of identification. And Mercury brings the planet of communication in a broad span, but it really is like giving things a name. It is cataloging, it is classifying life, it's taking record of what's happening. So, this Mercury really kind of like sticks to us, they become memories. And as we move into Cancer, we'll learn how that affects us personally, because we start to shape our identities based on our experiences with other people. And when we move into the third house, we're talking about our early childhood education. We're talking about our neighbors. We're talking about the people that are close to us, not in our home, but right outside there. And it represents us driving in cars and what kind of terrain is in our third house. What kind of things remind us of our childhood when we're driving down the road. It can represent the banking system and how you relate to the banking system in the third house, and also represents our siblings. So if you've got some planets in the third house, you might have strong sibling rivalry or togetherness, depending on what you have there. But we'll go over if it's empty. We're going to start introducing some different people into the landscape so that you can start to see what Gemini looks like in different charts. And it's very interesting because almost all of them have empty third houses, but strong Gemini, strong Mercury. So we'll get to see how that gets interplayed. And then when you look at your chart and you see, oh, there's an empty house, that means there's a math problem we can solve. And that becomes a very mercurial thing. We're starting to solve problems and create strategies. So Gemini is a mutable air sign. It just represents the wind. It represents moving from one thought to another and this free flow of movement. So if you can imagine a Gemini body, it's always moving. It's never staying still. It doesn't want to, it doesn't do well unless there's movement. So that's why they belong to the air functionality. And so it's a mental process. Even though they're in their body and they're moving around, when they're moving around, the mental process gets quelled a little bit. So this becomes a place of great understanding and being able to quiet the mind when the body is in movement. So it's very important for a Gemini signature. Um, the element of air is always introducing the other. It's never just about the self. In fact, it's no fun unless there's a reflection, someone to debate, someone to give information. This is how air signs thrive. Now, as a mode of operation, these people are flexible. They change, they move, they deal with crisis moment after moment because they're here to solve some problems. The mutable signs are here are as our strategists of the wheel, and we'll go into that a little further. But in a larger scheme, these signs will represent the larger meanings of life. What creates the things that make us go, oh wow, that's not something I can let go of. That's a memory that stays here. And lastly, when we look at the sign of Gemini, it represents the twins. But why? Why is it a dual sign? And I don't know if you've known any Geminis in your life, but they tend to have one way of thinking, and then the next day it's gone, and they think of something different. And so it almost seems like there's two people living inside of one body. There is just this need to have both experiences of life, to be on the defensive, but to be on the opposition, and to know what those both feel like, and to have language around it. So the dual existence of life is in the sign of Gemini and the twins, meaning two sides of the story, and also meaning that two things can be true. What do I mean by two things being true? I always like to think of it, me and my partner, we talk about, I'm happy, but I'm sad. And those two things live inside of me, like at this moment. And that's the truth. There's nothing more I can do about it. And that should be okay. We shouldn't have to get rid of one to only have another because, well, Gemini needs both. So now we're going to dive deeper into air as just a general sense for the sign of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So all three of these air signs, they really bring to the rest of the zodiac their information and how they're going to move forward. So, some keywords that we can think about is like the exchange of ideas, being very logical, being lyrical with one's words. It's poetry, it's mentality, and our perception of life. It's inviting other people into our world and taking our first steps into the outer world, right? So we get our legs and we start to hobble around, and we're looking for goods and services. We're looking for a good future, a good horizon. So these people are constantly thinking about the future, what's ahead of them. And they're trying to look around the world and see, does this seem right to me, with identifying and looking at the world. When you receive all this information as a kid, of what's right and wrong, when we go out into the world, we have to test that. And sometimes, we realize that the theories and practices that we were taught maybe aren't the right thing. And so we have to go back and learn a different language. So these people are always questioning. They're curious. They're in the need to know because they want to be right. And being right, having the right knowledge, being at the center of what's in the future is survival for these signs. They thrive when they're informed. And when Gemini is informed, then they're able to make the right decisions in life. So these people are really wanting to, oh, sorry, we just admitted Kelly. Hey, Kelly. Speaking of strong Mercury, Kelly, as you get yourself together, we just started actually. We're first couple slides in, and we were previously gushing over each other's homework, so we'll save that for the end. And maybe Fetty wants to tell us about her Mars and her Venus together at the end. So we were just going over air, and these air signs, they use their minds to create new strategies. So if you are having a hard time in your life as a fire sign, earth sign, water sign, you go to an air person, they're going to be able to remove the emotional BS for you and just lay it out. And they're wonderful for that because they get things out really quickly. They're really right there with you. They can probably give you some stories. They probably know someone. They're very network oriented air, so they know people, and they know stories. They know success stories and they know failures. So they're good cousins to have on our side. Um, so it's, letting people into your world, getting to know your neighbors, knowing their name, naming things, again, Gemini, and attending schools. Now, air signs are more modern when it comes to how they operate in life. So you're not really going to find them wanting to live out in the country so often, because, well, where's the people? Where are the roads? Where's the transit? Where's the communication? So I would say that, yeah, they could live environments like that, but they need exchange to a high degree. And so it might be wobbly for these people. They need cities, they need small communities and co-ops so that they can relate their ideas and get new information. So it's kind of a more civilized living. And it's trying its best to come out of survival. Gemini is one of the last survival signs. My teacher says it in that way, and I have yet to figure out how to say it in another brilliant way. But when we're in the third house, it's kind of our last desperation of what we have, what we came into this life with, what people teach us, and what we're going to take out into the world with us. So there's kind of survival techniques, if you don't have one of your senses, say sight or hearing, it becomes even more hard to live your life. And so you've got to develop different ways of communicating with people. So it's survival, it's live or die. It's the introduction of walking, running, biking, and with Aquarius, they're planes. So we don't get off of the ground and we don't see really the horizon until we get to the sign of Aquarius. But that's who they represent in a nutshell, and we'll talk about Aquarius many weeks down the road. So it's using our legs, it's using our intellect, our curiosity to get us to bigger, better places. Yep, and we'll move on there. Do any of you have questions or anything to add? Feel free. Feel free to add it in the chat or unmute yourselves. You're fine. So mutable. Now we're going into the mode of operation a little bit more. And we're incorporating the mutable signs, the signs that work together to help us develop our need to create opportunity for ourselves. The risk-taking aspect of our lives belongs to the mutable signs. It is the introduction of a spiritual life. So this is far more than just our Aries, Taurus living life. This is, I'm harmonizing with the rest of the world, and I'm trying to find my place in it. And there's so many things that I can participate in that help me manage and take care of myself and my resources. So being in this mutable energy really does make you a beautiful problem solver. And, when you're really in the mutable energy, there is a cooperation with the flow of life. You're receiving messages and you're dutifully offering what you have, like, say, this class, for instance. I heard from my God that I'm to continue teaching and to make this class. And I felt really nervous. It was a risk because I'm going against my Gemini teacher. Am I going against the teacher? I don't really know. I have my own teachings. And so it's a risk to explore new opportunities for oneself. And it really helped me feel like I could take life into my own hands. And it gave me a lot of confidence. So this is really going out in the world and making a way for yourself. You do this with these mutable signs. You do this with, all of these houses that are outlined here and the signs, and we'll talk about them more. But we're just with Gemini. And, here we're just learning about the early education of life. We're learning how to get to the higher education. When do we become the teacher instead of the student? So that's in this mutable energy. And it's moving around our neighborhoods, but also exploring the greater terrain. So it's really getting intimate with the workings of life through mutability. So signs is the how, the planets are the what we are doing, and the houses are where. So the third house is the house of, we discussed, education and our transit system. What planet do you have? Or excuse me, what planet do you have in the third house? Okay, if not, then we're gonna look to the planet. Okay, well, where's planet Mercury? How do I do my third house? How do I Gemini? And then we can also look to the house that rules Gemini. So in your chart, when it has Gemini in a particular house, what is it doing there? So there's many ways that we can create strategies for different answers through the birth chart. It's not just you're a Gemini and so this is how you live your life, but we all have pieces of Gemini. And so we need to integrate how that works for us very personally. So how about we talk about personal Mercury and how that affects us? I put money on here. I know Taurus represents wealth and abundance and, probably actually touching the money. But really, I think of Mercury as receiving the money. It is receiving that check in the mail. They wrote your name on a piece of paper and they say, you are owed this money. So when we look at Mercury, we're looking at the working function of our money and where we're going to get more of that money and what are we going to learn, who are we going to touch, where are we going to travel in order to expand that money. And that's where Mercury starts to become way, way important. We always look to Venus, but Mercury is how we going to do it. So let's go through the chart together. And let's bring that up. Here we go. So if you have Venus in Aries people really thrive and find satisfaction when they pave a way for themselves. Right now, Venus is in Aries, and it's the activist. It's the person that's passionate about the imbalances of life. So when Venus is in Aries for a person, or when Venus is in the first house, we're definitely going to notice where our battles are and where the hard fight is won. So this person is going to be very motivated to create new experiences for themselves, and that constant creating new, really this person is reinventing themselves all the time in order to feel a sense of satisfaction. So this is a really nice person to have in your life. If you've got some ideas and you want to solidify some things, they're going to help you find the resources so that you can survive. So if you have, I'm going to keep it this way. So if you have Venus in Taurus or the second house, your values and your satisfaction are going to come from the accumulation of the resources. So again, if we think of the bull, if we think of a cow out in the field, this slow, intentful animal is grazing. and they're grazing all day on, little bits of nutrition. What they're eating doesn't have a whole lot, so they've got to do it all day. And they've got to become a storehouse. So these people become, you know, the people that you can go to when you need a cup of sugar. These people are going to know how to create and cultivate a really comfortable life. And they're going to want to make sure that that's available to them. So they're going to be very work oriented, and really feel the need to manifest all the beautiful things in their lives. So they're going to have really good taste, and they're going to be very skillful, having Venus in Taurus or Venus in the second house. So when someone has Venus in Gemini or Venus in the third house, these people are a wealth of knowledge. In fact, when they need to feel satisfied, when they need to feel a sense of value, they look to the other person for they need to be fed. They need to be fed with words and stories and questions. And so, even in relationship, these people desire to be with people who are able to disseminate and exchange and have good conversation. So these people are always in need of, really exchanging. Um, these are the people that are on social media. These are the people that are interacting with it and learning about the news and trying to be street smart. These people are going to be very street smart because, it's valuable and, it's survival, So Venus here is very important. They need a lot of people. They need both sides of the story. We're talking about Mercury. We're talking about Mercury. Yep, talking about Mercury. Sorry about that if I said Venus. Is that what I said?
No, I think that I took it in as Venus, so that's my bad. I apologize.
Sorry about that. So, yes. You know what? Let me start that over. Because I was thinking about Venus and I apologize. So, when we're talking about Mercury, we're talking about the exchange of communication. And for them, with Mercury and Gemini, it's survival, but it's also a way of looking at life. It's a way of perceiving and always constantly developing a new way of thinking. So these people are definitely the people that you're going to go to for the news. They've heard the recent thing and they've heard both sides of the story. So when you've got Mercury here or you've got Mercury in Gemini, the way that money is spent, the way that money moves in and out of these hands is quick. And a lot of times they're invested. They're invested in education. The way that someone would get money through Gemini is through writing, speaking, using their voice. So Mercury in Gemini is in its dignity because that's the sign that rules it. So it's all of the good things that Mercury brings and all of the not so good things, because sometimes words can get minced and mixed. So, I'm going to go back to Taurus as well. So when Mercury is in Taurus, or in the second house, these people are definitely, again, going to really need to figure out where their voice lies because these people tend to be more quiet, and are slower to find their voice, are slower to get to the information. So if you would see them on social media, maybe they're a couple days late talking about a situation with Mercury here. With Mercury here, though, there is a slower process with money, so they might hold on to it longer. Good savings account, wanting to build a bounty or wealth. So Mercury in Taurus is very, kind of tight-lipped, wanting to hold on to it, and very stubborn with money, with communication until, they have discovered or have heard something different in their given time. So you can't really force a Mercury and Taurus to think or believe anything. It has to be seen and felt for them. Okay, so now we'll talk about Mercury and Cancer.
Uh, do you need to redo Aries?
Okay, so thank you. When Mercury is in Aries, I'm sorry, I went through this Venus thing. I apologize. There's a lot of Piscean energy, and that kind of mixes me up sometimes. So thank you for holding me accountable.
I think it's true that Venus is in Aries right now, and that might have been where you started talking.
I think you're so right, Deborah. Thank you for understanding. Okay, so Mercury in Aries. Okay, so these people are very quick and powerful with their words. They can be cutting with their words. These are not the people that are going to give you rose-colored glasses. It's going to be very aggressive, astute. These ideas are going to be fresh. This communication is going to be quick, and it might not be often. With Mercury in this sign, this person can go, go, go. But, after a while, the fire could burn out. So this person is really in need of other people to help them fan the flame with Mercury and Aries. These are the people who are really able to defend and stick up for what's right. They're the ones that are going to be outward spoken about it, and they're not going to care what anybody thinks. Aries signature, they're just going to do what they're going to do and not care much about what other people think, because they're okay with going at it alone. Okay. So how would money pass through the hands of a Mercury in Aries? Quick. When there's fire in the hands, when there's Mercury in the hands of a fire signature, it moves as fast as it came. And so there's got to be this understanding that it replaces itself, and that you have to put in the work in order to get a result. So, we've got to fight. And what Deborah says is go fight, win. I love, I love, because I remember that, at all the football games when I was, playing in band, and it's very much that it's, screaming at the other side. It's being emboldened. It's being lit up with Mercury and Aries, or the first house. So if you've got that signature, blessings to you. I would want to be on your good side, not your bad side, for sure. Okay, so now we are going to move to Mercury in Cancer. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. So let me check the chat real quick. Yeah, thanks, Kelly. You were on it and I didn't see the chat either. So yeah, it is Mercury, not Venus. Okay, so Mercury in Cancer. Mercury in Cancer, these are the sensitive ones. These are the ones that are touched. They feel things deeply, and so they want to be treated as if they want to be treated how they are treated. So they treat people kindly a lot of times. They have a lot of respect. There's a level of care for people because they have this intuition. They're able to tell about the rhythm and intuition of someone else's thoughts. So they know how to read a room really well. These people are so empathetic that words and too much togetherness could really tire these people out. So they need long moments of respite. They could talk all day one day and then maybe not talk for another 4 and not want to see anyone. And that's perfectly normal. Now, when Mercury is in a water sign, there's something beautiful that happens. There's a level of processing that happens. The 4th house and Cancer represents our processing center. When things have happened to us in our lives, what do we do? What is our reaction to that? And when we have experienced life, when we have processed things fully, we get to use the bathroom, we digest. And with Mercury here, this person has digested something very deeply. They're very closely intimate with their own feelings and emotions. So when they speak, other people feel it. Other people really resonate with it. And so in the charts of people with Mercury in Cancer, they end up being amazing writers. Every single one of them are able to put words in a way that feels complete. And when people, read this, they feel a personal sense of identification, like, I want to feel that way. I have felt that way. So very beautiful placement, Mercury in Cancer. So when we have Mercury in Leo or in the fifth house, this is a very vibrant expression. This is loud. This is I'm awake. This is I enjoy my life and I want everybody to know about it. They are always in the mood for play. They don't know when the party should end because they are the party. And so with Mercury and Leo, these people really want to inspire others. They feel inspired by life, by looking at people who've really taken charge, people who are in center stage, those who are actors and musicians, or, people who influence other people in a positive way. Mercury and Leo, they're really attracted to them. And they really look forward to emulating that kind of life. And so, when you hear them speak, sometimes it's a loud roar. They're wanting to gather people together so that they can have a sense of belonging, but more so find their pride. When we think about a lion, we don't often think of them associated with a bunch of other lions, but it's kind of true. Maybe one gets kicked out and they've got to go off and find a new set of people that is family. And through expressing themselves in this very heartfelt way, very emotional way, they're able to draw people to them and draw their new pride to them. So with Mercury in Leo, it's very influential. There's a lot of musicians that have this placement, that when they use this Mercury, it's very much, I know who I am, I'm having fun with my life, and you should do it too. It's very empowering. And also, yeah, Mercury and Leo can be very strong once the voice has been developed. Sometimes it's a little hard, when you're born with a big signature and everybody expects for you to be so great in it. But, sometimes that takes a while for some people to develop. So when Mercury is in Leo, there can be this sense of like developmental kind of delay and needing to find one's direction. So there's that. Also, very close connection to children with Mercury and Leo. There's a conviction about them with Mercury and Leo, a care for them, whether you have the children or not, teaching them. And the childhood is foundational for how these people move in life. So they're very attached to their teachers and influential people, and that's how they build themselves and go forward. So that's the last about Mercury and Leo. So when Mercury is in Virgo, these people are the strategists, the engineers of the chart. They are the scientists and the medical doctors. They're the ones that make Mercury function. Because they are the second sign to rule Mercury, it's kind of a different function. It's no longer just about naming things and writing things down. It's like, okay, with Virgo, we're sitting down to say, okay, does this work for everyone? Is this a cooperative way to live with the body? These people are very focused on what their bodies are doing. So they're very aware of, not feeling well. They could have immune systems that need to be worked and built upon. So they may not come out of the womb super healthy. as babies with a Virgo signature. Oftentimes there's a lot of manipulation that happens because of its mechanical nature. And so as we know as women, when there is a C-section baby, they often come into this world without their defenses, because they didn't get a chance to come out of the birth canal. And so, they're often dealing with heavy loads and learning how to deal with crisis in a very beautiful way. So these are the problem solvers. Mercury in Virgo is going to attract situations that seem like crisis, that seems like a problem always needs to be solved because they just are good at it. I'm sorry. It's not our fault that you were born with this, that you are able to have amazing words, able to think quick, and really funny. Okay. Mercury in Virgo ends up being really funny because of the way that they're able to look at life. They see life from, the way that it doesn't work. They've looked at their childhood. They've looked at all of these different things. And there's so many of it that we can't control. We can't get caught up emotionally with this practical sign. So at the end of the day, we make a joke about it and we move on because, the functionality of life needs to continue with Mercury and Virgo. So they're very neat, can often be very manicured, could be very beautiful. And the sign of aesthetics is Virgo. So if everything looks good, then it is good. So that's why tidiness and putting things in their place is a Mercury in Virgo or sixth house function. So when we have Mercury and Libra, now this is a person who is moving in their mind. They're moving from one thought to the next and always thinking about how there's consequence, that there's someone having an experience. These are the people that are able to put themselves in someone else's shoes when displayed wonderfully. Sometimes this placement can be, aloofness or not caring about what's happening in other people's lives. But the highest intention is to take notice about what's missing, what people need. So these are the people who are able to deliver the fundamental needs for particular people. They're able to connect people to the resources they need. Connecting to the right people is very important with Venus, or excuse me, with Mercury in the sign of Libra. They're looking for the other. They love difference with this sign. They're looking for culture. They're looking for different kinds of foods. The grass is greener on the other side. So, I can put myself in someone else's shoes. I can see that other life could be better. Sometimes they think that that's true after some time, but a big word for this kind of placement is discernment, is being able to make a decision based on your own volition. It can be hard to separate yourself from other people with this placement. And so you're just kind of always entangled or always worried about or always, moving around ideas with other people, but kind of not able to settle within the self. So with this placement, it's very important to learn individuality. Let's see, what else can I say about it? How the money passed through the hands of this person. I would assume that when it came to relationships or being in close proximity with other people, they're very giving here. And so there's got to be discernment on how much to give, but the money will flow out of the hands of these people because they're wanting to satisfy and bring something to people that they don't have. So very giving. And yeah.
Is the money is Venus though, right?
We attract money through Venus, but actually getting the money in the hand or having someone write a check to you is a Mercury function. So we're getting and playing with money with Venus and Mercury. Venus is more of a receiving energy. So it's like, who's going to call you on the phone to tell you that there's a job opportunity? That's Venus, right? The talking on the phone is the Mercury, but someone thought of you. Someone thought that you had value or that you could deliver. And so they give you this opportunity. Now, you delivering and then that check being cut or you being paid for those services is the Mercury.
Like the delivery of, right? Like Mercury is okay. Thank you.
Mhm. So the Mercury is the money in the hand, but Venus is, what we're giving, the value of our services. It is, yeah, the attraction of the money opportunities, right? But Venus doesn't make sure that we get the money. It's Mercury that makes sure we get the money. We got to move. We got to drive. We got to walk in order to get to that function. So I hope that makes a little more sense. So when there's Mercury in Scorpio or the eighth house, these people are very, very depth oriented. They really want to have a deep emotional conversation that's real. You can't have small talk with these people. They understand the shadow. They understand that like life is hard. So these are the people willing to talk about that with you, willing to investigate. They love mysteries. They're speculative. They don't trust easy, they got to look at it and be together with people long enough to make a good judgment on whether to trust and open up and keep commiserating with someone. So it's not a very trusting Mercury, but it is the Mercury that is really able to attract situations to them that pay off debts or incur debts. So let me explain. Scorpio in the eighth house, in common knowledge, when we are in astrology talk, we talk about this area of the chart that's taxes and gains and losses. So with Mercury in Scorpio, this person is always going to need to make sure that their taxes are filed properly. They might incur debt quite often or always have a reoccurring debt. And that's not a bad thing because when we don't have all of the necessary resources, so if we have a lot of debt and we're needing to pay that, we're needing to pay off, that loan amount, we need to do something in order to get the funds for that. So we start to attract situations where maybe it's a second job or maybe it's doing something for someone else in exchange. So, with Mercury here, it may not always be money that's in exchange. There might be some other contract that needs to happen. So the giving and taking of resources with Mercury and Scorpio or the eighth house, it's very important that it's give and take and that it's even. So that no person is taking one power over another. And with Mercury in Scorpio, one needs to be careful that they're using the right use of power, that they're using their words for good, and to not manipulate or take over a situation. So, in a nutshell, these people are powerful. These people will get up in front of a crowd and convince and transform the whole landscape of the way people feel by really touching them in ways that are radical, ways that people feel like, yeah, that was painful and you understand me, and so now I trust you. So that's that kind of energy. So when you have Mercury in Sagittarius or the ninth house, this is the author. This is the person who comes into this world with so much knowledge, they don't know what to do with it. The sense of direction here is everywhere because they came here with something. They came here to express more than what could even be taught. So this is kind of like the inner teacher. With Mercury and Sagittarius, there's a deep belief system, whether it be religious, whether it be spiritual, there's something larger that kind of holds this person together and gives them the ability to create meaning in a larger way. Meaning is extremely important with Mercury in the ninth house or Mercury in Sagittarius. They're not going to do anything for very long without looking at it, examining it, and realizing, I can do this by myself. I don't want anybody to be my boss. I'm a freelancer. So it's very hard to keep these people under wraps. They're expansive. They're wanting to engage and bring different ideas and theories and history, and they want to back up what they say. So these are the scholars of the chart. These are the ones that always are going back to school. They're always trying to figure out how to boost their knowledge or become a master. So that's why higher education, going off to college, taking your master's degree, that's all in this ninth house Sagittarian energy. So when the money passes through the hands of a Sagittarian, like I said, it's very quick, it's very extreme, and they might invest quite a bit in their education. So these people might spend a lot of money on travel, on experiences that are otherworldly in some sense. And that's perfectly okay. So if we've got Mercury in Capricorn or the 10th house, this person is going to know all the rules. This person is going to know the way that things should be. And they're wanting to corral everybody to follow in a straight line. These people are very aware of the social systems of what's going on in life and whether they are working or not. This person is always being tested. This person is being tested constantly because they're developing into a strong leader. So this is a very leadership type of placement where this person has developed themselves over a long life of having to really step up to the plate and mature quickly. So these are usually the firstborn children who are taking care of their brothers and sisters, are really kind of taking the lead in the care of the larger scene of what's happening. So the larger scene meaning, if the home is the largest thing that they've got in their life, they're going to make sure that everything inside of that home is tip top. These are the people who are able to finish a project. These are the people that you bring into your life if you are wanting to implant an idea and get to the end product. These people are diligent. Their daily practice and the way they live their lives in that routine is very structured. Sometimes this is the representation of stagnation, lack of movement, because we get really focused here with Mercury and Capricorn. There's a job to do. There are people to take care of. And sometimes I go to the wayside. I don't address myself the way that I want. Or the way that I need. So, these people, I encourage them to really come out of the routine, to kind of break things up, to break their own rules. Yeah, Mercury in the 10th house is a strong signature. Okay, so Mercury in Aquarius. These are the people in the chart that know everything. And the reason I say that is because when you talk to someone who has Mercury in Aquarius, it almost seems like everything they say is like, yeah, no, you're right. They have this very convincing quality. They're able to foresee so many different things because they're thinking about the future that it almost seems like you can't catch up. They've got to be right, right? They're the fortune tellers. And so, when you're talking to this person, they're able to get you on their side. This is the friendship house and the friendship sign, Aquarius. So everybody's their friend. They're able to network. They know who can get you what. Um, and they're great on the phone. They're great on social media. Um, they are activists in a way of making sure that people get together in their groups and they're treated fairly within that group. It also represents marginalization. So, when we collectively create these groups that are very specific, it's not the intent to, ostracize people or to kick them out of the group, but it's kind of a part of the way. So with Mercury in Aquarius, they can not want particular things or people in their group because they want to elevate civilization. They want things to be high rises and modernity and being able to get the right medicines and seeing the right doctors. And so here they are trying to look for new strategies that are technologically advanced, that are closely connected with one another. So they're very interdependent. So meaning they have a level of independence of their own that's really amazing, but when the group connects together, then it becomes a larger thing. So these people are able to assign tasks well and know which one will bring the wholeness together. It's a very holistic sign with Mercury in Aquarius. This would be people who are interested in astrology. So Aquarius, the 11th house, Uranus, that's all very much looking up at the stars, looking up at the solar system. And so if you've got strong placements here, or if you've got a Mercury in Aquarius, that outer world, what's happening as above, so below, becomes very important. And when you have Mercury in Pisces, man, I have read some amazing things from a Mercury in Pisces. And what I will say is there's a poetry and flow that only some people will understand. And the some people is the people that are on that current, the people that are feeling that at that moment. They're able to collectively speak upon what's happening out in our exterior world. They're the people that very much care about the fair treatment of animals and the right use of resources. And, they're really trying to come together and homogenize and to feel one with each other. These people thrive when they are just kind of in a group and nobody's selecting them out of the group. They're just kind of all one with everyone. It's kind of like a school of fish. It's a very impersonal placement. So these people might not remember your name, or they might mess up directions because they're moving with the current, and so it might be slow or it might be fast. It's kind of whatever's happening in our environment collectively, and so they feel that they can kind of take on all of that energy. These people need open air environments, or they will not do well. They'll get sickly. They might like to get dirty and might like to be naked and in the natural world. Whereas a Mercury in Virgo is like, hey, put your clothes on and do your hair and brush your teeth. Well, the Mercury in Pisces is like, we don't need to do all that. What's the point in all of that? So there's an all-encompassing spiritual, I'm natural, I am who I am kind of placement here. Um, and they're able to speak to the masses on whatever they're connecting to. So these placements, I've seen a lot of, famous people with um, some really all-encompassing thoughts, even having Mercury in the 12th house, not in Pisces. They're able to relate to people um, in a way that feels larger than themselves. Um, and these people are more geared to finding what that larger thing is. So believing in God, having a name for it, having a ritual and a practice for it. Very spiritual placement. Okay. So that's Mercury through the signs. If you would like me to elaborate on your Mercury, please let me know. I'd be happy to assist. But until then, we can move on to polarity because Betty, you have a question? No? Okay.
No, I just was, this whole time was like just going back and forth between I struggled because of all of these Mercuries. I haven't even thought that deeply about people's Mercuries. And now that you're going through the Mercuries, I'm like looking at the charts and saying back, like just was thinking back and forth. And I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense.
Yeah. You start to realize that there's like repeating signatures, there's repeating patterns happening with this Mercury, and you're just like, oh, it's much larger than just the Mercury placement. Like I can add more to this and it makes it fuller. So I'm hoping that the polarity will bring this in because, when it comes to the third house, or excuse me, when it comes to Gemini, the arch nemesis or the lover, the one who understands you the most is going to be a Sagittarius. I've seen a lot of Gemini people be globbed onto Sagittarians because they're smart, they know themselves well. They're spitfires, Sagittarians. They take on the world, they take the risks. They're willing to believe whatever the heck they want because hey, it's the last fire sign of the wheel and they're not going to, waste any time. The Sagittarius is a level of historical knowledge and internal knowledge that just comes out over time and they don't know where they get it. They're just born with it. And it becomes this really beautiful expression of um, being inclusive, being tolerant of other people, being cultured in some way. So, when you leave the Gemini or third house aspect of our early childhood education and we go towards Sagittarius and we go to a higher level of focus, these classes get bigger and the kinds of people that collate, they come from all over the world. So Sagittarius brings to us, all of this spiciness. It's lovely to be intermingled with diverse people who have different belief systems, people that can change your mind. Sagittarians like that, come change my mind, right? And graduating college or becoming a scholar is extremely important for the Sagittarian signature. They want to feel that they have developed themselves fully to a point where they can teach someone, that they can write a book about it. Sagittarians are authors of the wheel. So having a personalized or specialized study is a Sagittarian kind of thing. And we'll talk about the planet, but wherever you have Jupiter in your chart, that's where Sagittarius is like, hey, let me pull back that arrow and say, hey, this is what you should teach. This is what you should learn. So we'll talk about that a little more. But Gemini on the other side of fire, just so you know, anytime an air sign is in the chart, their opposite is going to be fire. So air fans the fire and the flame and to keep it going. Whereas earth and water work together because they're containing one another. And earth becomes the container for the water. So this becomes important with creativity because fire is our creative flow and air becomes the way in which we kind of spread our energy and our words and how we're going to build that up. So this is a very creative axis. This Gemini is adding to the table, I need to know more. And the more that I know, the more scholarly I become, right? As information changes, as new details develop, I become smarter. I become street smart being Gemini. I'm in the know, I'm in the now. What's happening right now. Doesn't matter what happened last week because things are always changing. And so with this Gemini signature, they're always like, am I smart enough? Did I get all the information right? And they're very geared towards making sure that they've got all of those tiny details. And if you catch them off guard, if you tell them that they're wrong, it could be a little defensive. And they could pull out that Sagittarius and tell you what. So, wonderful axis. When we think about planets, we've got Jupiter and we've got Mercury. So we're talking about Mercury today. We're talking about the way we spend our money. We're also talking about, the information that we take in and the perception of life that we carry upon ourselves. And there's a need to express that at a certain point. We can't hold that in. So, there's a very exchange-oriented operation with Mercury. You give a little to receive a little. You give to take and take to give. And Mercury is ruled by two signs, Gemini and Virgo. So Gemini will catalog and make sure that everything is named, but Virgo will make sure and make it functional, and they'll make it fit in the particular categories it needs to go into. So Virgo is kind of the filing system, and Mercury is all the files. Now, when Jupiter comes into the picture, Jupiter's wanting to expand things. Jupiter is the great expander of our solar system. It is the biggest planet of the solar system. So we kind of assign a lot of bigness to it, that it being the great benefic, they call, which is just basically this very favorable, generally, if people always look to Jupiter if they want to have luck fall upon them, or maybe they'll get a bunch of money. That's kind of a Jupiter thing. I've received many large checks while something was transiting over my Jupiter placement. So, that's kind of interesting. Don't know if it's all the way true, but it's happened for me. So, after we've gone through Mercury, we've cataloged life, we've gone through the motions, we've observed the things, the stories, the people around us. Well, now we've got to develop our beliefs around that. Okay, so after a while, if this thing is always true, then that's what I believe. Then that's true. And so Jupiter brings truth to the matter. Truth in whether it's right or wrong, truth whether it's religious or spiritual. But in any case, it's an extreme, and it wants to expand life. It wants to make things bigger. It wants to have this risky experience. And so Jupiter pushes you. Jupiter pushes you to invest more in your knowing and to realize that you do know things, that you are actually, in fact, a teacher. Jupiter is where we realize, do I have the mojo? Do I get certified? Do I get my certificate? Am I good enough to parlay this message? So it's, bringing the social world into our landscape with Jupiter. We take our Mercury and we send it through Jupiter. We talk about what we've learned. We use our Mercury and we expand on it by spreading it to others, by making it available in different languages, by being adaptable and tolerant and offering a larger view of how we communicate, how we create access for one another. So they work hand in hand in a way that maybe sometimes, people don't talk about very often. I hear more Sagittarius and Gemini. And I like the idea of being able to look at my chart and seeing what kind of good luck can befall me and how I use that my Mercury to get there. How can I expand on that? Where and how do I need to be more scholarly so that I can step up to the plate and have these checks written in my name? So the cool thing about Sagittarius and Jupiter in the ninth house is that Sagittarius in the ninth house represents documents. It is actually filing the documentation and getting your certificate, getting named a PhD. This is where your books are published. So if you've got something going on and you want to release a book, you better make sure that something in that ninth house is going on, or there's a Jupiter transit, or Sagittarius is in the scene, because they make everything bigger. And so whatever knowledge you have to bring to the table, it's here for us all. So the ninth house is where we exercise our ideas. We get into our peer groups and we test them out with one another, become social about it, talk about the perceptions that have been developed in the third house and start battling that out. So is that true? The ninth house is where you become a teacher. The third house is where you're the student. And the ninth house is where you travel to great lands. The third house is traveling all of the land that is close to you, that is in your immediate vicinity. So you can see how they're working together. Small, large, small, large. So when you go to other places of the world in the ninth house, you become small again, because you got to move around that environment and Gemini and catalog and, kind of learn, what's good to eat and talk to your neighbor. So there's always this ebb and flow between the two of them. And, the third house, if we've got planets here, our schools and access to the metro and our neighbors and having a radio on dial, being immersed in TV shows or stories, these people really love this. These people thrive on this. The third house is where your childhood friends live. It's where your siblings live as well. So if you've got placements in the third house, you're going to see your relationship with your siblings and kind of how that played out for you. So as an astrologer, when I look at children's charts, I look here if they're having developmental issues, if they're having a hard time finding the rhythm of life. I can find some answers in their third house. Just because the sign that rules it, I'm able to see how they're perceiving the world. And when you're able to see where someone is at, then you can devise a new strategy for them. And Mercury is a strategy. The third house is a strategy function. So this is a house that's heavily populated if someone has had really bad childhood experiences. Children that have been heavily shaped by ages 0 to 6. They are people who are lyrical and musical, but their childhood really helps them develop who they are, and they become people who speak about it in ways that are amazing. I don't know if any of you know who Kendrick Lamar is. He's been all over the place, all over the Super Bowl. Third house person, third and ninth house person. I'm going to tell you what I saw, then I'm going to tell you what I believe. Now you decide. That's that function there. Mercury through the houses. we did talk about that. Would you like for me to go over this and talk about it in a more focused way for the house? You let me know. If not, we can move on. So basically, I would, we did go over having Mercury in Aries or the first house. Sometimes I get a little backwards with this because I want you guys to personally connect with it. Um, so I want to always deliver two ways of seeing it. And I think maybe the first time we did that. So you let me know if I need to harp on the Mercury some more, or if there's a different way you want me to help you look at it. So Gemini. Gemini is the twins. Gemini's two, both sides of the story, heavily influenced on what they're told. So, you know, they become attached to what you tell them. So you have to be careful of the information that that you're giving them, or that they take in. So that's where all this fake news comes from. Such a Gemini thing with Trump. He's such a Gemini. He's just like, this is the way I perceive life and this is the way it is. And the rest of us are like, hello, you're not cataloging life right. Like, look at history, look at this, look at that. And it's just kind of very like one-sided, and he just kind of goes with where he's at and what he perceives. It doesn't really kind of encompass a whole lot of people, maybe his close relationships. So that's kind of how a Gemini operates. They keep their people close, and they have this ability to verify one another, but outside of that, it's threatening. And so that's why we always see him acting in a very threatened way. And when someone threatens his competence, and it just doesn't make any sense to the rest of us because, well, we all think differently, don't we? Um, Intelligence is paramount for these people. It's part of their survival skills. And, the more I seek, the more I learn, the longer I live. And so information becomes something that you can give to someone. It becomes a resource. So that's why, you know, Mercury becomes our money maker eventually, because, what we've learned, how we've managed our life becomes who we are after a while, and that becomes valuable. It becomes focused. But it takes time to get there. So curiosity is needed for Gemini, and there's a level of innocence. If they've never heard about it, you'll be amazed to see the childlike wonder on their face, because finally they get to learn about something new they hadn't heard about. So this need for fresh information is really good for a Gemini or a third house person. Um, and they love stories. They love what's black and white. There's no gray area for these people. They need to know whether it's definite this or definite that, because the gray area does not make them feel intelligent. They cannot tell you whether to go this or that way. It's delineation, it's separation, it's seeing dual. But also, Gemini represents our fingers, our hands in general. So that's why I say money passing through the hands, and represents our lungs. So, you know, if you ever look at a Gemini person, they have the most interesting hands. Usually hands that don't look like they belong on that body. So you'll see this really Venusian, small-framed woman, and she'll have these big, huge, manly, gorgeous hands with these long nails, and you're like, wow, that's extreme. Or they'll just have very long, slender fingers. I mean, their fingers are noticeable. And they use their hands a lot with Geminis. They usually will develop carpal tunnel, will usually develop issues with, you know, uh, keeping their lungs clear. They can tend to be smokers of the chart if they've got enough fire in them. So it's very important to, have open air for a Gemini. for there to always be working with the hands so that they feel busy, and to have constant movement so they don't get stuck in the mind. So there's that for Gemini and the twins. So I wanted to bring a person and introduce you to Prince, and you all know who he is. He was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is the accurate time. And we are looking at a human being that knew how to multitask in the greatest way. So he was an early success. He got signed at 18. So he used his Mercury so well that it was like this early thing. They signed him. So that means he gets the money, right? So he's born into this life, you know, and learns a multiplicity of different instruments, works with different people, but he had this heavy influence. I mean, his father was a jazz pianist, and his mother sang in the band. So they had created a band together. It was called the Prince Rogers Trio. And he was really inspired by the fact that his parents had done this when he was a young boy. And so he named himself Prince. It was an homage to this. So he has the sun in Gemini in the 8th house, right? And Mercury is not too far behind. That is something that you're going to see common. The sun and Mercury are generally pretty close together. I cannot give you the maximum degrees in which they expand, and I'll give that to you maybe next week. But in any case, they're roughly around 30 to 60 degrees within the sun. So this Gemini person, he's born with Mercury close to his sun. So he came into this life with a gift, with the ability to see that his words were important, that he had something to say. He was lyrical, he was musical, he's probably always humming and singing and, you know, around the house, probably trying to make his mama happy. Mercury in the 7th house, he really understood that there was a need that he had. Like the public was calling to him, hey, you've got a good voice. Hey, you've got a good ear. You know sound very well. I need this from you. And so he had to quickly develop himself so that he could meet that role. His fast track to fame just continued to roll and roll for him. So in 85, he won an Oscar for the best song score, and he was the first Black man to do so. So he, you know, was really paving the way of this new kind of artist, this person who could be of a different origin, you know, he could be, you know, multi-raced or whatever. At times, you know, you look at him, you think, is he man or is he woman? Very gray areas sometimes he would play with. He was so great with his words that, you know, people had to sit down and really discover what he was actually talking about. You know, what were the hidden mysteries of his words? You know, you'd have to listen to the song on repeat in order to really understand fully what he was talking about. And it usually always had to deal with some kind of love or heartbreak or something that we just really related to well. Mercury in the 7th house is very relatable. So he acted and directed, he wrote and sang, he authored, he played music. I mean, this guy was multiple, he was just multidimensional. You couldn't get him to not move around. So if this client came to me and they said, I just wish I could be more focused. Well, I would tell you that yeah, you should be focused on something that feels good, a larger genre, but you should have ways to recoup and new things to learn within this dynamic. So these people have to have many things in order to feel satisfied, to feel like they're offering something good in the world. And with the sun in the 8th house, wow, he knows what loss means big time. You lose things sometimes in the 8th house, you know? And he lost a child. He lost a child with his first wife, and they tried again. and it ended in miscarriage. And then they got their marriage annulled. So you see with the eighth house, people come together, they say, I do. We're going to join our stuff together. We're going to unionize. We're together. And we're going to make a baby. That's a very eighth house thing. I want to consummate, and I want to create something with you. I want to make our two a three. And in this process, it's hard. You know, you want to create a life, but we can't control that. And I think they both probably got pretty wrapped up, you know, in the loss of that, coming together and things not working out. But man, we got along so well. Sometimes marriage doesn't feel good to a Gemini sun in the eighth house. He did get remarried, but you know, it wasn't this infamous thing that he had done with the first wife, because you know they had worked together. She was on tour with him. She was fabulous, fabulous singer. But we can see too that with this chart, when you have a Gemini, you know that there's a strong belief system in something, right? And so he was born a Seventh-day Adventist, and then, you know, over time became a Jehovah's Witness. And I think he played with other religions and entertained other things as well. But he was always on the search to find what would heal him. And I say that because he has Chiron in the third house. The wounded healer of being able to see the future in Aquarius, having foresight, having the ability to you know, just upgrade my life, you know, have my life be bigger than the ones that my parents created for themselves. And so, you know, there's always a constant pain here. You know, what sometimes can be someone's greatest gift can also be their Achilles heel, you know. And so there's a lot of healing that needs to happen with words and connection to the body. Because he wasn't able to connect to his body fully, you know, he ended up having to partake in, you know, to partake in things that made him feel better, which we call drugs. You know, everything can be used as a drug and an addiction. But he wasn't given the right drug. He wasn't properly informed about what he was getting, and he overdosed on fentanyl. He wasn't taking fentanyl, he was actually taking something else. But we lost him at an early life because he didn't have the right information. He was no longer street smart, you know, he's living in a high rise. He's, you know, far removed from, you know, the life that, you know, one would live where you know where your drugs came from, you know the people. And it's unfortunate, but he was brilliant. His music lives on. And it's really beautiful to see what he created, you know, the symbol that he made. You know, he just made his life for himself. He categorized the way he wanted to see it, and he made everybody follow. And everybody loved it, really. It gave us a chance to wear purple and to feel like we could be androgynous and, you know, to live a weird, freaky life. Like, it's kind of freaky. So Mercury, our planet of communication, we're imparting informations at fast rates. You know, we're conveying the facts, we're giving the details, we're giving all of the particularities to our trip. It's our maps. It's what guides us to our intelligence. And it's our teachers. It's how we feel about their advice. And it's the reasons why people speak to you. So when you have Mercury in a particular sign, you know, who do you attract that speaks to you out of nowhere? You know, people passing you on the street, what kind of people? It's our immediate reaction to feeling validated with Mercury. You know, when someone tells you something about yourself, they tell you whether you're good or bad, our reaction to that. And the sign that the Mercury is in is, you know, our immediate reaction. So Mercury is the way we eat. It's how we like our food. It's having strong legs when there's a strong Mercury. Usually the person will have very muscular legs. They will be able to be powerhouses. They can shoot. They're able to really give that dynamism that's needed to push forward and go quickly. And so it's like if you have strong legs, you're going to live a long life, because if you're able to move, then the heart is pumping and you're feeling motivated, and there's a level of cognitive function that happens. So there's so much research out right now, and my daughter gave a report about creatine, a short story, because we're in Gemini. I'm going to tell a short story. She wrote this wonderful report about how important creatine was for people, for athletes, firstly. Then she explained how it would affect elderly people, people with declining mobility. Did you know that this gives more power to the legs? That this is a natural function, creatine, and that we can actually take it and be healthier people and improve our mental cognition? So they're relating the lower body and its mobility to our mental function. And that's why when we see people who are moving slow, when, they're in a wheelchair, when they're, not able to move their legs fully, they're not breathing right. You ask them questions, they don't know. So these things are intertwined, the legs and the mind. Okay. Another person. Oh, have you guys heard of Teal Swan? Well, there's a documentary about her and her life, but in a nutshell, a long time ago, I found this woman. She gives just sometimes really awesome spiritual advice. She is kind of our modern millennial guru. She likens herself to be another Osho. So she's got this heavy Gemini signature in the 12th house. Look at that spiritual house. She's got Sun, Venus, Mercury, the North Node, Chiron. Her whole life and identity is wrapped up in this spiritual understanding of life. When you see popes, when you see people who are leading in a way, who are clergy, they're going to have a heavy 12th house. They're going to have something there that signifies that they're a guru and they're appealing to the masses. Their ideas are working, and her ideas worked for people. The reason why is, I think, because there's a lot of people who associate or are trying to get out of painful situations. And because she displays herself as someone who has survived something, they take it at face value, and they really see her as a wise teacher. So she claims to be a survival of a Satanist cult that she experienced in childhood. And she says that's what kind of propelled her to realize that like cults existed, and that, she was being taken advantage of. She says things like, she deals with or had dealt with suicidal ideations and just having a hard time living in a body. And that's very apparent with this 12th house. She really did experience, maybe not having the people she needed in her life. They were disappeared. They were gone. And so she kind of had to develop her own way of looking at life, because, that's how she was going to survive. That's how she was going to keep herself afloat. If no one else is there, she's got to become her own resource. And she did. So she started to catalog and create, as a Gemini would do, all this type of information. She curated hundreds of YouTube videos that garnered almost 60 million views. That's a lot of views. That's a very public 12th house thing. So, what I think people started to realize, as she became more popular, is that, wow, she's pretty extreme. And she talks about suicide and depression and psychological issues, but she's not properly trained as a psychologist. So people see danger in some of the things that she says, and she has to defend herself quite a bit. She says, people like myself who are leading a spiritual movement, we live in terror of situations like Osho got himself into. We live in terror of being unable to control what other people in our following do and don't do, but being made responsible for it. So, we can all want to attain to have like this spiritual enlightenment. There's, you know, a certain level of responsibility that these people feel when they have this level of attainment. But there's a huge responsibility when it comes to it. And, we're all trying to be very careful. And, with this Mercury in the 12th house, not careful. Not careful because what's careful? No one was careful with this woman when she came into this world. She came into this world feeling like no one was there for her. And so when she approaches life as we're surviving this. And I got to bring my disciples and I've got to have my following because they also know, they have to know that they can get out of this. So people actually attribute her teachings and the people who follow her to a cult. She's got the moon in Aquarius. Aquarius always represents that cult-like togetherness where we ostracize all the things that we don't really like, that don't represent who we are. And we only listen to our group. We only listen to the teachings within here. And so she's able to kind of get people and keep people in this mind frame and thought process and listening to her. So that's why people are like, oh, she's a cult. And she's really had to go through and defend herself in many different ways. Her Mars is in Scorpio. And so, the things that she creates and the things that she makes, they're potent, they're powerful, all encompassing, and has the ability to take one's power from someone else or to learn to manipulate power in a particular way. So, whether we believe these things or not, she's a human being, a beautiful human being, and she's offered people solace in ways where they want to continue living. And I think that's important, regardless of all the other things. So lastly, our third house, our early childhood learning, it's really where we start to look at life in a different way. It's where we spread the knowledge, where we get our information from. It's the condition of the roads that we drive on. I've got Leo in the third house. So for me, when I'm driving down the road or places that I've normally lived, there's always been this vision of being able to see famous people and their homes. They are like roads of opportunity. So, there's billboards everywhere and there's creative people on those roads. And when I look outside the window, I'm looking for inspiration. I'm looking for something to make me go, wow, I've not seen that before. That makes me want to make a. So the sign that we have in the third house is kind of how we do things, how we look at life. And then the planet adds a little bit more flavor. If there's a planet there, or if Mercury is in a different house, we kind of congeal things a little bit. So the third house is kind of, what kind of teachers that we are required to learn from, or, our unchosen teachers, moving around the city, outside of our family unit. And the third house is just kind of the last time that we're learning something for survival's sake. And as we move throughout the wheel, we just become stronger and more adept, and more things get thrown into the mix. So last person, Ralph Waldo Emerson. So he was a philosopher, a transcendentalist poet, and an essayist. And he said some pretty remarkable things, and I've, kind of passed him up because I thought maybe he was a little boring. But this one quote caught my eye, and then I was really interested in looking at him a little further. So he says, the purpose of life is to not be happy. It's to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, and to have it make some difference, that you've lived a life and lived it well. So he's another sun in the eighth house, very closely related to the things that we have and we don't have, and to make notice of it. But he's got Mercury in the ninth house, the ninth house of positivity, of coming out of the darkness and seeing the brilliance of our learning lessons. When you go through a really bad hardship or like a breakup, and after time has passed, if there was something to learn from it, it would be found in the ninth house. There would be this positive outlook, like, yeah, it was painful, but there were good things about it, and I learned more about myself. So that's this person. He's going through life, experiencing the hiccups of life, and trying to pull out any bit of positivity that could fit in there. I don't know why he didn't believe in happiness. He's got Sagittarius opening the third house, but he's also got Capricorn there. That wounded healer, Capricorn in the third house. These Gemini people, isn't it interesting that they have Chiron in the third house? So they're wounded by the thing, and they come into this life really needing to, learn it well and to live it. And with this Capricorn signature, Capricorns know life isn't supposed to be happy. They don't do anything from happiness. They do it because they have to, because life moves on. And you are to be useful, and you are to show up in a way as a person that is astute and, has a good way of what's the word? Credibility. So this is a person who came into this life with a lot. His father was a clergyman. So here go the beliefs again. He was, his father came into this, his father had him and was already a clergyman, and then influenced Waldo. He called himself Waldo. And he then went to Harvard and then went to the Harvard School of Divinity. So he was, this was part of his life. Belief systems, believing in a higher power. And that was just something that swayed him to go the other way, because he wanted to see life in a more positive light. So after traveling to Europe, he started to begin to lecture on his spiritual experiences, and really advocated for ethical living. Ethical treatment, was advocated for the abolition of slavery. He would go around and he would proselytize about how terrible it was and why we needed to come together in a compassionate way. And his protege was Henry David Thoreau, which I did not know about. So that's super interesting. Both of these men had really exquisite things to say that were so simple, and still so valuable today. So he was a voracious reader of biographies, philosophies, and history. Mercury in the ninth house. That's all that Mercury in the ninth house. He was well read with literature and poetry, and he really helped bring philosophy to a higher ground, and brought it to help it take shape. So he was a very influential person, still is to a certain degree, depending on what you believe. But, Gemini has the ability to really parlay particular ideas. And when we incorporate Sagittarius in the ninth house, it becomes an ideology. It becomes a way of living. So, that's what Gemini brings to us. They always give us a way of looking at perceiving life from their vantage point. And it's always very interesting, because if we don't have that signature, then we're just kind of like, make it make sense. So this is the end of our Gemini